Well, hello everybody. This is Tim Green with Rattle Magazine, and this is a what do we call this? A 2025 Rattle Chapbook Prize walkthrough and Q&A. Now, this was a suggestion someone made just this morning, Amanda Price Morgan. And the cool thing about working for a small nonprofit with just a few people is that when someone has a good idea, you can just go out and do it. And so Amanda suggested that we have a video walkthrough of how to submit your manuscript for the Rattle Chapbook Prize. I thought it'd be fun to do it live and have a Q&A too for anybody who has any questions. And so that's what we're going to do. I'm not sure if anyone's actually going to be here to ask questions because I didn't announce this at all. But since the deadline is just a little over 2 days away, I figured that better do it now instead of waiting. So we'll do it now. But I think this is a great idea for Amanda. So thank you for that, Amanda. I think we'll do this every time we have a contest. We have the 2 contests every year. They're both fundraisers for Rattle and subscription drives and ways for poets to get their poetry out. So that's a really wonderful thing that we try to do. And so yeah, so we'll try to do that. I think I'll do it like a month out usually or something like that, or maybe 3 weeks ahead of time. But this is a walkthrough of how to do the Rattle Chapbook Prize. So if you have any questions, just leave them in the chat windows either on Facebook or YouTube, and I'll try to ask anything that you have. Okay, so if you're wondering about the Rattle Chapbook Prize, this is the history of it a bit briefly. So I really remember the moment I thought of doing this, and it's mentioned in the guidelines. If you go to rattle.com /prize or chapbook/prize, and you can go to content here and just click it right here, Rattle Chapbook Prize. You'll see this written out a little bit, but this is exactly how it happened. We were interviewing Jan Heller-Levy. I think it was for issue number, I don't know, was it 49 maybe? And Jan mentioned just in the interview, and I was sitting there, it was Alan Fox was still doing the interviews at that point, and I was sitting on a couch, in the room with him, and Jan mentioned this, that the most important thing that happened for her literary career was that when she won the Walt Whitman Award, it was wonderful, she said, this is a quote, but it also was a bad introduction to the world of poetry publishing, as if every publisher is going to send out 5,000 copies of your book, and your book will be everywhere. And I thought, well, that's amazing. Like, I want my book to be in front of 5,000 people. Why don't we do that? Why don't we do that as a prize? And that's where the Rattle Chapbook Prize was born. That was the moment I thought, hey, instead of not a book, but if we do a chapbook, we could fit it in with the issues of Rattle, mail it to all of our subscribers, and then those poets that won, and at first it was one poet the first year. That was Zaina Hashim Beck, who won the first time. Just once a year we did it, but then it was such a great thing that we decided to make it a bigger prize. Now there are 3 winners, and every issue of Rattle comes with a chapbook. And at the time we had about 5,000 subscribers. Now we say it's over 7,000 or 8,000. It's actually over 9,000, but you never know how much things are going to shrink or change. But at the moment, it's like almost 10,000 really subscribers we have, and they'll all get a copy of your book. And those subscribers include people like Billy Collins and all sorts of really wonderful poets, Jane Hirschfield and Patricia Smith, and all sorts of poets like that get your chapbook in the mail, and you get to have your poetry in front of all those people, hopefully launching your career or adding on to the career that you've already built, of course. So that's what we do with the Rattle Chapbook Prize. And though, like our 2 contests, it is a fundraiser and subscription drive for Rattle. So you get a free subscription by entering, which is a regular subscription payment. It's $30 to enter. You send your chapbook in, and you get 4 issues and 4 chapbooks of Rattle for that at the regular price. Plus, you get the chance to win this prize, and the award is $5,000 each. You get 500 author copies, which are like 8 boxes of books that you can sell yourself at readings and things, give to friends and family, send to reviewers, all sorts of stuff. So it's a wonderful prize to the 3 people who win every year, and we've had a bunch of winners. Let me go over here. You're going to see some of the chapbooks we've had, and this page needs to be updated, but all these folks have been winners in the past, all these wonderful chapbooks, and it'd be great if you were one of the next ones. So how do you enter, and what do you do? How do you format a manuscript? That's what we're going to be talking about here, and if you have any questions, once again, leave them in the chat windows. Either I'm watching on Facebook and YouTube. If you're watching on Twitter, then I don't really know where the chat goes, so I can't actually look at it. I've never figured that out. Okay, so what I thought I'd do is pretend I'm submitting my own chapbook. And so I have this book that's actually out that I wrote with Katie Dozier called Hot Pink Moon. And I'll put it on the screen right here. Hot Pink Moon. And so this is just a Word document. And this is the first page of the document. This is how we submitted it to publish it. And if I were submitting it, this is eligible. It's a book that we wrote together, alternating Hyben back and forth, and they're linked over the course of the month of April this year. And so there's 30 poems, and they're each one page, and so that's the 30-page max that is the max of the Rattle Chapbook Prize. If you're wondering why it's 30 pages max, that is because we need the actual book. When it becomes an actual physical book like this, it has to be less than 48 pages. Because see how this is called? It's not perfect bound. A regular book... Do I have a regular book in the range? A regular book is glued on the spine, and that's perfect bound. This is saddle stitched, which means it's one piece of paper folded in half and stapled together, which makes it really cheap. That's what a chapbook is. So the max that you can do for the machine to make it a chapbook is 24 sheets of paper folded in half to make 48 pages. That's why a chapbook is 48 pages. That's why anything more is a full-length book. So this book we were looking at, Hot Pink Moon, happens to be, it was a poem for every day in April. They're all one page each, so it's 30 pages. I'll read a question from Phyllis Charrett. She says, does it have to be formatted with cover art, etc.? No, it does not, and it shouldn't be. Actually, we work together to make these covers. Occasionally, let's see. So these two covers I happen to have right here. I have Denise Duhamel's In Which, and I have Miracle Thornton's Plucked. And these two, actually, Denise and Miracle suggested the artists, and then I worked with them to make the cover. And that's kind of what happens sometimes. Sometimes the winning author has an artist they like. This was Kukachi Black's book. He had an artist friend of his that he wanted to use too, so I worked with him to design this. We added some stuff, like the details on the back are not actually in the original. We work with all that. So you don't have to do that. The cover design is the publisher's responsibility. That goes pretty much for every chapbook or book. That's how it works. The publisher is the one who comes up with the book. All you really need to submit to the Chapbook Prize, or really any manuscript competition, if it's a book contest, you need your poems in order. That's pretty much all you need. So you don't need to worry about the cover. Even if you had a cover that you wanted, we couldn't guarantee that we'd be able to use it. So we sort of have to agree on what's aesthetically pleasing and what works and where we can get rights and all that stuff. So don't even worry about cover art at all. Don't worry about formatting. I mean, you see in this manuscript that we're looking at here, I have this is the first page, and I have the title and then the subtitle of it. The Crown of Hyben is what it is, and then if you scroll down on this first page, you will see there's nothing else here. And that's an important thing to note. When you submit to this contest, some things are different. But for Rattle, we try to have everything anonymized. We try not to know who the author is as we're reading the poems. We want everything to be fair and not be biased based on who we think are submitting these poems. And so we ask that you remove your name and contact information from inside the document itself. Because when we pull it up on Submittable to read it later, we'll just see the poems in the document, the inside of the document, that's it. Then we'll be able to maintain the anonymity of the document. So don't, if you already submitted and you did leave your name in, don't worry about that either. How the reading system actually works is we flip through. If I find, as I'm reading a poem that's like worth publishing, that's that level of quality anywhere in the manuscript, I immediately pull it out to be printed. And so we end up printing all those manuscripts, and if your name is somewhere in there, I delete it as I'm printing it. And so I'll take up, we'll cover for your mistake. And it probably, won't make a difference. If somehow the manuscripts are identified, though, those are disqualified. So we need to carefully make sure we don't know who you are, but we try our hardest to make sure we're always unaware of whose manuscripts these are. Okay, so anyway, in this version, I have a table of contents. This is completely unnecessary too. This is page 2 of the document. There's a listing of all the poems, but you don't need that. If you want to, that's fine. Doesn't really matter. Page 3 is where the poems actually start, and this is where the count starts. We say it's 15 to 30 pages, and this is the first page of the 30. It's just the pages with poems. If you have like special dividers or sections or quotes that you want to have on its own, or images, people ask if they can include artwork and things like that inside the book. If you include that kind of thing, those count as pages too. So make sure that you're within that 15 to 30. It's the 15 at the low end because we want to have a book that's rich enough and memorable enough and full of enough content that people will enjoy it. And that really takes about 15 poems, I think. We already talked about why at the high end it's 30 because we got to get within that chapbook size. So here's the first poem, and this is just a list of poems. And this is a co-authored book. So if I were submitting this, me and Katie would split the prize if we won, and collaborations are fine. I would, I have to delete our names from here, which I haven't done. But since it was collaborative, they're tagged, but we won't do that. So I would delete these, just have the poems though, page after page after poem. Nothing else really matters. And these are all high end they happen to be. If they're multiple page poems, they just count as multiple pages, but just have them. One poem to start, start a new poem on each page, unless they're haiku, in which case you might want to have 3 or 4 poems on a page. But however you want it to be in the book, how manuscripts work, this is a regular sheet of paper. The regular full-size manuscript at like 12 font sort of shrinks into the size of a book at 6x9. So kind of have, how you want the book to appear in page by page. And so if we scroll down all the way, so this is 30 poems here, the very max we could do for a book. If I scroll all the way down to the last poem, which was here, where is it? There it is. So it's the very last poem. That's how I finished out the month of April on day 30. Then I have an acknowledgments page. And it doesn't have to be anything fancy, but it's nice to know, because remember what I said earlier, how we read is we read through the manuscript. If I see a poem that I might want to publish by itself, I pull it out, and then that's a manuscript that I'm going to read later. But if the manuscript doesn't win, I still want to go back and I might want to publish one of those poems. It's possible. And we've done that in the past too. So if you tell us which ones are published already and which ones are available, that way I'll know, I could publish that poem. And so it's a nice thing to pass along. And it's useful. If I don't know, I can ask, but then it ends up all the time being published. Yeah, I didn't mute my phone. So, so there's that. So, and traditional acknowledgments page, you would list the title and then where it appeared. And you can just make it a paragraph like that or whatever you want to do. For this purpose, I think it's more important to let me know which poems are available to publish, because we are interested in that. Okay. And that's it. That's all the manuscript is. It ends here. My document, I don't think you can see, but it's 33 pages, but the first 2 pages and the last page didn't count. Can you see the 30? No, it doesn't show. Oh, it does. Yeah, page 33 of 30, but the 3 of those pages don't count because they were the acknowledgments and the table of contents and stuff. And that's just the front matter. They call it front matter. And that's why it goes from 30 to 48 pages. It fills up with, we need all the copyright stuff. We need title pages. We need acknowledgments. So it's 15 to 30 pages of poems. Okay. And so now I have this manuscript. Pretend I've deleted all these names out of it because we don't want those. But pretend that manuscript is good to go. Now what I would do is go over to rattle.com/chapbook/prize. You can find it, like I said. And so this is the background of the prize. This is the awards. We're listing what you actually get out of it and how it all works. The deadline, I should note, is January 15th. That's this Wednesday at 11:59 p.m. Eastern Time. That's Eastern Time that it ends, so midnight there. The stroke of midnight, the contest is over. Click on Guidelines for the full guidelines. And this is the full guidelines. So the $30 entry fee is for a 1-year subscription to Rattle at our regular rate, yada, yada, yada. If you're in another country, because it's more than $30, it's much more actually to ship the issue overseas, we cut it down by 1, so you get 3 instead of 4. If you're in Canada or the UK or India or wherever you might be outside of the US, that's what we do to sort of make it balance out. We still don't make any, so it's a fundraiser. We actually don't raise any funds at all from overseas subscriptions because it's so expensive to ship there. This kind of balances out a little bit. Anyway, 3 editors judged by the editors of Rattle. These are all the stuff you already know. The one detail, we want this to be something that launches your career. And so we want to make sure at least one of the poets, and hopefully maybe more, are poets who are just starting out and don't have a full-length book yet. Because the idea is, like Zaina Hashim Beck did with her first book, that manuscript Arabi Song became a full-length book later. It's like a small section that grew into a full-length book very shortly after. We want to do that for people. So if you haven't published, you'll see a box in the submission window. You can check yes or no if you've been published, if you've had a book of poetry published before. Self-published books of poetry do count. We care about self-publishing. I think it's a valid way to go. We give talks about how important self-publishing can be in different ways, and we want to honor that as something that's legitimate, which means it is legitimate if you decide to publish your books yourself. These are unpublished books that we're looking for this prize. All right, open to writers worldwide. Poems must be primarily written in English. They can have other words in them in other languages, but we're an English language magazine. The assumption is that our readers are speaking English, reading poems in English, and a few lines and phrases and things. Up to a good percentage of certain poems can be in other languages, as long as you can understand it, as an English language speaker. And that's the key. So don't worry about like a few words or a few phrases or a few lines or even chunks of poems in other languages. But the poem has to be sort of understandable in English because that's our audience. And no translations either, because then you get into a lot of rights issues, translating, like who owns the rights to the actual work and how to split the proceeds and did you have permission to use it? That's all complicated stuff we don't want to deal with. We just want to launch careers of poets. Okay, so we mentioned the 30 pages, and don't worry too much about the formatting. Don't worry about the font. It says reasonable fonts and sizes. Some kind of serif font like Times Roman or Garamond or something is nice. It's easiest to read. 12 point around there is nicest. But whatever you want to do, that really doesn't matter. The winner is announced April 15th. And we were pretty strict about that. We've never announced winners for anything late, even through being evacuated for fires and things like that. So you can rely on us to read all these submissions until then. All right, so I have my manuscript, so I'm going to click here to submit. And this is the same thing, just listed out on Submittable's page. And we don't want to show you though. So hang on one second. Let me log out just to show you the whole full deal. So if I'm not logged in, and you go to this page, and it lists the deadline there, all the guidelines still. You go down, you can create your own account right here. And you can sign up, and that's how you do it. And you just ask a few questions, your email address, first name, last name, how you want to display. It's just a Submittable account. It's not a Rattle Submittable account. It's an account that works for all Submittable projects across everybody who uses Submittable. Rattle is an end user too among thousands. And that's actually the nice thing about Submittable, because one account sort of rules them all. If you choose to log in with Google or Facebook, that's an option, but be careful with that. Because you always want to do it the same way. Because if you log in by email sometimes, then you log in with Google, it'll be two separate accounts, and you'll be like, where is my submission? Where's my entry? It doesn't show up when I log in, and it's because you have two accounts, one logging in through a third party and one logging in with your email. So anyway, so sign up that way. I already do have an account, though, so I'm going to go back, and probably most people do. I'm going to go off the screen so nobody sees my password, and I'm also going to delete my address so nobody sees any of my personal information. Sorry, everybody. But we're not that. We're very, very open, but not open enough that I want people to show up to my house or call me on the phone. Okay, so this was the page I was showing. This is the Rattle Chapbook Prize. All the guidelines are listed here. Again, at the bottom, you fill out your address. It's important that you fill out your address because you get a subscription. It's $30 to enter. You get a year subscription of Rattle. If you're already a subscriber, it adds on another year to your subscription, but we update the address to whatever address you put here. So it's a way to change your address too. And that's where the subscription is going to go. So make sure you fill that out in a way we can get you your copies of Rattle. Now I'm going to put, let's see, I'm just going to type in some stuff. There we go. Is that enough? Okay, we need city, blah, blah, blah. Okay. And a code. That's okay. Is that everything? That's all. Those are the required ones because we need your subscription. Now the guidelines are still up here, and now you are getting, I'll try to shrink this. Now you're getting to the actual content. So the guidelines are still up there. 1 year, 4-issue contest subscription that tells you what you're paying for and buying in addition to entering. Now our book, William and Katie wrote, was called Hot Pink Moon. So I'm going to put that as the title. There's really no need for notes. We don't look at them anyway, but if there's something you want to say, there's a place to add it here. We'd only look at the notes after we announced you as the winner, as we were looking up your contact information. But if you have something, you might want to say like, oh, I have a friend who does the covers and I'd love to do that. Feel free to leave it in a note or something. Now, this is that question I mentioned. Have you ever published a full-length book of poetry? I have, so my answer would be yes. But if I hadn't, I would put no. If I click no, there's 3 chances of winning because we want somebody, one of the 3 has to be somebody who hasn't published a book of poetry. So if you enter yes, you can't be one of that third slot that has to be a poet like that. So you really have 2 chances of winning. So your odds are better because we could publish 3 previously unpublished poets as the winner, but we can't publish 3 people who said yes, if that makes sense. So anyway, then all you do is choose your file, attach it. I'm going to go to so you can't see because of the way the windows work on this broadcasting thing, but a window popped up where I can select my file. I have a folder called Books. One of the books is Hot Pink Moon. I'm going to put in that document. You see it uploading. Doja Green, Hot Pink Moon. Make sure it's there. Now, docx is the preferred file type, but PDFs are fine. Old-fashioned docs are still accepted. But docx is the best because it's easiest to edit later. And that's what we use to sort of format it when we actually publish it. So that is nice to do. It lists the files here. And all these files are fine. You won't be, punished for doing an alternative file, but the docx is my favorite. And then there's the payment. It's going to tell you how much you have to pay. Continue to payment. We're not going to show you what's down here either, but I would just enter in the payment. So let me try to clear out. That's actually an expired credit card anyway, so it doesn't matter. But still, we'll delete that. Anyway, so here's the payment window. Put your credit card number in, then pay and submit. It's as easy as that. You can also pay with PayPal, as it says. And once you do, it'll take you. I'm not going to pay because I don't want to have to refund myself. But that's all you do. And once you get the payment in, when that goes through, you've submitted. And that's everything I've got to say. That's how you do it. And it should be pretty easy. We have questions all the time. Try to answer as many questions as we can. Let's see what we have here. Let's see. So Carla Schwartz wanted to know about the acknowledgments, but that was answered. Yeah, we do want an acknowledgments page. Oh, we don't need music right now, though. The background. Okay. Should the manuscript include page numbers and table of contents? And that's a question I already answered too. It can, but it doesn't count against you. It doesn't count as page count or as like we don't like poems, like books better because they have that. It doesn't really make a difference, but you can if you want. Let's see. Yeah, Ellen Carthy says, is there a limit to how many poems can be included? I've assembled 48 poems around a theme. None are very long poems. Most are 12 lines or so. That's probably a book length. 12 lines. We have in the chapbook that's coming up, it's a book of haiku by Kat Lehman. She has 9 sections with 9 haiku each, so that's 81 haiku. She's got 3 on each page, and that's a good number. So if you have really short poems, if they're epigrammatic, if they're short form like haiku or tanka or something, you want to have multiple poems on a page, that works fine. But for most being 12 lines or so, that's a full poem. You probably wouldn't want to have multiple poems like that on a page, and so your limit there is to 30 of them. You can't have 48 poems, so that's too much. That would be like a full-length book. Jimmy Thomas says, can you enter more than once? The question, and you can enter more than once. You get multiple subscriptions to Rattle. So if you enter 2 books, you end up getting 2 years of subscriptions for $60 and 2 chances to win, of course. Carla Schwartz says, it says not including self-published on submittable. We're talking about the whole curation thing there. So for publishing in the magazine, we don't, if you self-publish, even if you self-publish in a book, though, books are still counted as curation. It's a whole discussion about that. But if you're posting on social media, on blogs and message boards, that's totally fine for individual poems, but that's sort of not what we're talking about here. The books have to be previously unpublished. Okay. And so let's see, are there any other questions? I mean, I think I try to cover all the questions you generally get. I mean, people ask about, one thing that wasn't mentioned is color. It's possible to print color if you have art. It's much easier and less expensive. It adds probably $1,000 onto the printing cost to print in color versus black and white. That is something we'd kind of consider. If there's wonderful art that you have the rights to that adds to the poems and it's in color, we do it. But it's sort of an ask. And so if you have art that you want to include, it's better if it's black and white, but you can add anything you want to. I don't think nobody's really added any art who's won anyway. Because really our mission is to promote the practice of poetry, and we care about the poems. That's what we care about. We care about poems that sing to us and we remember. Let me go over on Facebook. Faye Srella says, would you want to have a trigger warning for sensitive topics? No need for trigger warnings. You see it all when you're reading submissions. Some things I wish I hadn't seen, but I already seen it all. And so there's nothing that you can trigger us on. Let's see. Annie McGee Tibbet says, I submitted without a title. Is that okay? Submittable makes you use that title field that you saw when I was entering the form. And that's like a column on the spreadsheet that they make. And it's sort of how your submission is tagged. It's an important field. So it will make you say something. If you want to just call it poems or whatever, that's fine. If the manuscript is just 15 poems with no title and no nothing, that's fine too. I'll consider it the title being poems, 15 poems or something. And if they're great poems, that's fine. That can totally win if they, we can figure out themes. But if you have a title and themes that come together, that can add to the manuscript. It's kind of like titling poems and like an individual poem. Let's see. Yeah. And Ann2 says, may I just say the whole process through Submittable was so easy, I was surprised. Yeah, that's why we use Submittable. It makes it easier on our end because you can have multiple editors logging in, labeling things, leaving notes to each other without ever seeing the manuscripts. They used to come in for the poetry prize. Gosh, for the poetry prize, the single poem one, I would have to log everybody's email into or whole contact information into a database by hand. And then I would give a unique number to each manuscript of poems or each poem. And then so it'd be in the database log, there'd be a cover sheet where there was a number in the contact info, but then the number was completely detached from the poems, and it was just this whole process. And now with Submittable, you just don't have to see anything, and you can have it all be anonymized, which we like to do without any difficulty. So that's really nice. And then on your end, as a submitter, you have one account, and you can submit to Poetry Magazine, Rattle, Paris Review, all the places that use Submittable, which is really nice. Okay. Are there any other questions? Yeah. Let's see. Okay, well, I think that might be all the questions we have. If you have any other questions, leave them in the chat windows right now or ask later. Jamie Thomas says, here's one I missed. Sorry, Jamie. Would you recommend submitting even if one doesn't feel ready? Is there any risk if you send in a stinker? Well, there's no risk. It is 3 winners out of 2,000 maybe manuscripts. So that's important to keep in mind. If you don't think that the poems are worthy of winning, your odds of winning are probably not very high, but you get the subscription to Rattle at the regular price. So if you want to throw it in because you would have subscribed anyway, and it's worth $30 to get those 4 issues and 4 chapbooks, you might as well, because maybe your opinion of what's a stinker is off and we love it and we want to win it. So you might do it, but keep that in mind too. So we're not trying to take everybody's money or something. We're a nonprofit trying to promote poetry. That's what we're trying to do. So, yeah. Sarah Rashid Khan says, my poems are not in one theme. Is that fine? And yeah, that's totally true. I talked, I think if you look back at the Rattlecast with Eric Campbell, which was like around 80 or so, we talked about this at length, where, Eric really misses the old days where there were just a book of poems was called Poems, and you just had poems, and these were the best poems I've written the last few years. and I agree. I think there's a way that, there's sort of a trend in having really thematic type books. And yeah. Sorry, I'm just reading some more comments. But there's a trend in having really thematic type books. I think one of the reasons for that is because it's sort of easier to market. If you have a description of it, you can put that in all the fields in Amazon and on your website where you're selling the books, and you can say what the book's about. And it becomes this sort of easier way of organizing it. And it's like another layer too. In the same way, the title is important for an individual poem, and you can have cuts against it and ways it makes you think and enter the poem. The title for a book can do that, so it's an opportunity to add something to it, but it's not necessary. And if there's 15 great poems, I think that's what's at work. Okay. Alan McCarty says, clarification: poems that appeared in my blog are eligible, but not poems that appear in my self-published chapbook. Yeah, so I guess there's some confusion because there's different guidelines about individual poems versus the books here. So for a regular issue of Rattle, maybe I'll just break it down. You can't submit, if you're submitting a poem for the magazine or Poets Respond or whatever, an individual poem, you cannot have it have appeared in a book, any kind of book, or in another magazine or an anthology. That's what we call curation. Somebody picked it to publish it, even if that someone was you, into a bigger collection. So those are curated. We don't take curated poems. We only do poems, but you can have it on a blog. You can have it on social media. You can post it in message boards. You can have shared it on live streamed readings like the Rattlecast. That's all fine. That's not curated because you're just pushing your content out there without any kind of collection. It's not in a book. It's not put together like that. So that's for individual poems. For a chapbook or just any kind of book generally, like the opposite almost is true. I mean, not really the opposite, but we don't want that book as a collection to have been published. And it doesn't matter how you published it. If you published it self-published on Amazon, or if you had a press doing it, we want to be the first time that book is out in the world. And that book, though, can have poems. It can have poems that have been in other magazines, anthologies, even other books, as long as you have the rights to them. It can be, the poems themselves can have been anywhere, because the copyright, the actual thing that's a piece of work in a book, is the collection as a whole. And so we want a clean copyright on that book when we publish it. And so the individual pieces can be gathered from other places. It doesn't matter. It's the same with our Rattle Young Poets anthology, actually. Sometimes those poems by young kids are reprinted, because that's an anthology we're putting in a book. It doesn't matter that it was already published somewhere. But for the magazine, we want stuff that's never been curated, if that makes sense. Phyllis Charrett says, how about public performance but not in print? For us, public performance is fine no matter where it is or how. The thing that is the intellectual property is the fixed form version of that poem. We want to be the first to curate it, either the first magazine or book to publish it in the magazine. But that's fine if you perform it somewhere. That's what we're talking about with the Rattlecast, or on the radio, or at a reading, or any kind of event. Those poems are yours, and you're free to submit them. We'd be happy to be the first person to publish it. Let's see. Oh, and Jamie Thomas says, I hadn't thought to collect already published poems into a chapbook. Yeah, well, definitely. I mean, that's kind of there's sort of a path you go through with publishing books, where you take individual poems, you publish them in magazines. It's like the standard path. You publish them in magazines. You get a good number of those published in magazines. You put them together in a chapbook. Then you publish that chapbook, and you get more poems, and the book becomes longer, and you make it a full-length book with a small press. And so that's sort of the standard operating procedure, and that's definitely a good thing to do. Yeah. Okay. Oh, I really should have silenced the phone. Okay. Let me see if there's any other questions, but that might wrap it up. Cabbing Girl from Alaska says, what if a reading is posted on YouTube? For example, the Fisher Poets Gathering. Well, so we're getting sort of off topic a little bit because for the Rattle Chapbook Prize, the individual poems in the manuscripts can have been published anywhere as long as you have the rights to them. And so it doesn't even matter, whether or not we consider reading at a gathering like that posted on YouTube as a reading. Either way, it wouldn't matter because they can have been published other places in the chapbook, in the manuscript. That's how it works. The whole thing can have been published, but individual poems can have been published, and that's like the standard way of doing it. Usually a lot of the poems have been. For regular single poems in Rattle, we only consider curated in a fixed form to be the publishing standard. And so that it's on YouTube, you read it at a Fisher Poets Gathering, totally fine for submitting it to Rattle. Either way is totally fine for including it in the chapbook. And McGee Tibbet said, can the title be changed later if it's a winner? Yeah, we can edit things. What you submitted is what we choose, but then we work together on making the book even better. So these are, some of the books are not edited at all from what we chose. Some of the manuscripts, we dropped some poems or moved things around. We made the poem as strong as we could. And so, I don't think we've ever changed the title, but we could change the title. So we can work on stuff. It's sort of along the lines of once the book's selected, it's in a production process, and we're going to try to make it the best book as we can. So there's a whole editing thing. We, obviously proofread and stuff like that too for you. But I offer editorial suggestions and move things around, cut some lines, things like that. Okay. I think that's all we have. Okay. Over on YouTube. Let's see. Share Rashid Khan says, the poems I chose to pull together for the chapbook use very simple everyday language. I am used to editors saying pushing the boundaries of language. Would this affect that? No, we want the books, every book we publish, to be different and varied and, as surprising as possible. And so, especially if it's a book that's engaging, and we want it to be engaging and memorable, but if it's a book that is different in the way it sounds than other books, but it's very engaging, that's the kind of thing we're looking for. We want it to be a surprise every time for our readers. So, All right. I think that's going to wrap it up. Okay. I'm just going to wrap it up. Thanks, everybody, for participating. And, if you have any more questions in the future, feel free to email me. That's going to wrap this segment up. Thanks for listening, and good luck with your entry. Bye. I should say, too, we'll see you on the Critique of the Week on Friday. And for the next poet coming up, next Sunday, it'll be Denise Duhamel, actually. Right here, winner of one of the 3 winners of last year's Rattle Chapbook Prize, is the guest on the Rattlecast this Sunday. So tune in for that right here. Okay. But in the meantime, good luck with your Rattle Chapbook Prize entries.